Darkness Unspoken.
Halloween night, 1974, Pasadena, Texas. The streets were alive with children dressed as ghosts, witches, and superheroes. Their laughter echoed between the houses, and the glow of jack-o'-lanterns lit the sidewalks. Candy buckets rattled with every step. It was a night of excitement, a night of innocence. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing seemed dangerous. But the real horror wasn't hiding in a mask or lurking in the shadows. On that night, it was hidden in something as harmless as sugar. Inside, a single piece of candy. Among the many families out that evening was Ronald O'Bryan, an ordinary man by all appearances. Neighbors knew him as quiet, polite, sometimes a little distant. To them, he was simply another suburban father, trying to give his children a good Halloween night. He had with him his son Timothy, just 8 years old, dressed proudly in his cowboy costume, and his daughter Elizabeth, 10 years old, with her pointed witch's hat tilted slightly to one side. They walked together from house to house, just like countless other families on that street. The children ran up porches, knocked on doors, and shouted the words every kid waits for all year: trick or treat. Strangers handed out chocolate bars, lollipops, handfuls of candy corn. It was routine, cheerful, harmless. But as the evening wore on, one particular house caught their attention. It was dark, no lights on, windows black. Most kids skipped past it, assuming no one was home. Yet Ronald lingered. He approached the door, disappearing into the shadows. Moments later, he returned, holding 5 long Pixy Stix, brightly colored tubes filled with sugary powder. The kids' eyes lit up. Pixy Stix were a treasure. Nobody questioned where he had gotten them. Nobody imagined that inside something deadly was waiting. Later that night, back at home, the children poured their candy out across the floor, excited to sort their treasures. The living room glowed warmly, wood-paneled walls, the faint hum of the television in the corner, the sound of laughter outside drifting through the window. Timothy, still in his cowboy vest, held up one of the long Pixy Stix and begged his father to let him have one more treat before bed. Ronald leaned closer, smiling faintly, and carefully tore open the top of the tube. The sugary powder spilled onto Timothy's small fingers. The boy grinned, tilting the candy back, pouring the sweet crystals into his mouth. But almost immediately, his smile faded. "It tastes bitter," Timothy whispered, his face twisted in confusion. His father's response was chillingly calm. "Go on, finish it." And so Timothy did. Seconds later, he began to cough. His body stiffened. His small frame convulsed violently. He dropped the candy, falling to the patterned carpet, his limbs seizing uncontrollably. His mother screamed, rushing to his side, panic filling the room. Ronald hovered above him, pretending to panic, yet watching with a detached stillness. Timothy's cries turned into gasps. He clawed at his throat, his tiny chest heaving desperately for air. The sound of his mother's screams mixed with the choking sobs of the child. And within just a few minutes, Timothy lay still. He died there, on Halloween night, in the arms of his horrified parents. The news spread quickly. Pasadena police launched an immediate investigation. Officers scoured the neighborhood, knocking on doors, questioning families, searching candy bags. The fear was electric. Parents tore open their children's candy, desperate to see if it was safe. Soon, detectives discovered that 4 other children had been given the same Pixy Stix that Timothy had eaten. 4 lives hung in the balance. But by sheer luck, or perhaps hesitation, none of them had touched the candy. The tubes were collected and tested. Inside, investigators found pure potassium cyanide, enough to kill not only children, but grown adults. Just a few granules were lethal. The dose inside each Pixy Stix was massive. Halloween, once a holiday of laughter and sugar, had turned overnight into a nightmare. Across Texas and beyond, parents looked at their children's candy with suspicion. The phrase, "Check your candy," was born, a warning whispered every October since. At first, investigators assumed a stranger had tampered with the candy, some faceless monster targeting children. But as the pieces came together, the story took a darker, more intimate turn. Evidence pointed back to one man, Ronald O'Bryan, the father, the man who had placed the poisoned candy directly into his own son's hands. The motive? Greed. Detectives uncovered that Ronald had recently taken out large life insurance policies on both of his children, $20,000 each. He was drowning in debt and saw their lives as a payout. The revelation shocked not just Pasadena, but the entire nation. The idea that a father, the one person meant to protect his children, could coldly poison his own son for money was beyond comprehension. Ronald maintained his innocence through the trial, but the evidence was overwhelming. In 1975, he was convicted of murder. Nearly a decade later, in 1984, he was executed by lethal injection. From that point on, Ronald O'Bryan was no longer just a man. The media gave him a name that endures to this day, a name whispered every Halloween by anxious parents checking candy bags. The Candyman. The story became legend. Parents across America warned their children never to eat candy that wasn't carefully inspected. Rumors spread of poisoned apples, razors in chocolate bars, and hidden needles. Though most were only myths, they all traced back to the very real death of Timothy O'Bryan. Every October, news outlets retold the story, fueling the fear that any sweet could hide poison. Strangers were no longer trusted. Communities changed. Halloween, once carefree, was marked by anxiety. And perhaps the most haunting part of all, Timothy's death was not the act of a random killer lurking in the dark. It was orchestrated by the man he trusted most, his father. The real monster wasn't a masked stranger in the night. He lived inside the house. But not every horror is real. Some are born out of legend, stories that we whisper in the dark, daring ourselves to believe them. The next tale is one of those. A story about a mirror and a name. The legend of Bloody Mary.